And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Rematriation is Indigenous woman-led work to restore sacred relationships between Indigenous people and our ancestral land, honoring matrilineal societies in opposition to patrilineal violence and dynamics. On today's Open Connection, we bring you the third and final part of Dr. Amy's parents' presentation at the Nation to Nations Women's Gathering.
We also received so many emails from people who were just touched by our story. It became the national news story. I think it was the top national news story on September 29th, the day it came home. And of course, the media carried the story around the world. But because of that, I got a lot of emails from ordinary people who just reached out to me. I think one of my favorite stories came from a 911 telephone operator. And he wrote me and he said, I just want to say thank you. I turned on the news today and all I do in my job is I deal with tragedy. I deal with other people's tragedy on a daily basis. And I turn on the news and there's no more like sad news. Today, I saw the story about that totem pole and I just had to say thank you because it was positive and it made me feel good. And he goes, as a Canadian, I also have never seen that many positive news stories with Indigenous peoples. And it made me feel proud for the first time as a Canadian to see that we're actually doing something that's supporting you. So I just want to say thank you. And so that was one of the more touching emails that we received. So the day of the pole's arrival, the sun came out. Our oral memory talks about when the poles were stolen, that there was a big storm that came up the Nass. And then right as we went down and create the pole, and some of you watched this, the sun came out and it was just beautiful. And even for those of us who had seen the pole in the museum in Scotland, it looked like a completely different pole in that sunshine. And we could see things that we'd never saw before on it. So we now have peace in our hearts. And I've learned to believe that the impossible is possible. And I'd like to return to the story of the vision. So I asked my brother Calvin to share with me the meaning of the story of the print that he created for a feast. Actually, this is kind of a funny story. So here you can see we have the Niska flag at the Scottish government being flown. And so Angus Robertson pulled me aside the last day that I saw him in Scotland after he did the ceremony with us. And he privately told me, he said, Amy, he goes, so the first time we showed up, we gave him a flag and we told him that according to our laws, wherever a totem pole was meant that it was, Niska property and that it belonged to the chief. And so he stopped and he goes, you have my full attention. And then we left the flag with him. And so he remembered that. And when he told me that when the pole came home, that they were going to raise it in the Scottish legislature for us. And I completely forgot about that on the day of our feast. I hadn't slept and we had hundreds of things to do and people to talk with. And I don't get a lot of WhatsApp text messages. It's not my preferred app. And I noticed on that, I mostly have like reporters or like kind of trolley kind of people like reaching out to me that I didn't know. And so all of a sudden I get this message and I think it's some like creepy guy sending me some message I didn't know. And then I look and then I'm like, oh, it's actually Angus. And he sent me a picture to tell me what they'd done. So that was neat. And we also had a cultural exchange with our colleagues from the National Museums of Scotland, and Samogany Stall got a kilt that day. I don't know, Pam, has he worn it yet? And then on October 5th, because it did take some time, we officially had the pole raised, and we're waiting for some professional photographs of what the pole looks like now. I understand there's some lighting behind it, and it looks quite beautiful. So hopefully, Erin, you can come back and take those pictures for us. These are just some of my personal pictures, and those are some of the key people that also supported us from the museum on both sides and with their expertise in raising the pole. And of course, a huge success of our project was that Samogany Stall managed to get out of Scotland, got on his plane on time without getting fully arrested. So that story was that his luggage didn't come, and on the very last day when we went back to the airport, Teresa Schoper brought him to try and do one last attempt to get his luggage back. And in doing so, it was going to make him late for the plane. And just so happened, I understand that there's a couple of police officers there. And if he had to go through security that day, the way that we all did, then he would have missed his plane. And so they just decided to arrest him, and they arrested him. And then they drove him onto the tarmac so he didn't have to go to security. But no charges were laid. Some other things that we continue to have different pieces of the story unfold. So we've now heard that there's been 2 awards received by journalists that have covered the story. And it's interesting because, and there's another 2 journalists that are up for another national award. And it was those journalists that spent the most time with us and really you could feel that they were there in their hearts. Those are the ones that are getting the awards. And so we have 2 journalists from Narwhal. I think we'll find out tomorrow whether or not they got their award.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Launched in Victoria in 2018 by Canadian journalists Carol Linnett and Emma Gilchrist, the not-for-profit organization, the Narwhal, deploys a team of investigative journalists with just 2 rules. 1, follow the facts. 2, tell it like it is. Let us rejoin the conversation with Dr. Parent.
In it, I asked them to apologize and to teach other journalists about what could be done differently. So they showed a lot of courage in writing this piece and putting it out there to support further learning. So I'm happy that they're being recognized for their work and for their courage. We continue to do some knowledge mobilization projects around the pole, and so there's more information there. So just going back to that vision, so I asked my brother Calvin to tell me a little bit about the story behind the print. And he said that the raven in the print represents you talking to the pole, trying to bring the pole home with everyone from Scotland for us. He said, I kept the mouth of the raven open because you're usually talking, sis. Yeah, Calvin's also a raven, and he has a good sense of humor. And he quickly followed up with, that's because you're always sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with others because you're an educator and you're a doctor. And he said, the day you came to talk with me about the work you're doing in Scotland, you're also talking about bringing back our way of life. So you talked about the importance of rematriation and the color red in your dream before you left for Scotland. So the raven in the print is finally getting to rest by sitting on top of the pole after your long journey home, which is represented by the chiefly hat that sits on top of the Nistach pole. And the hat signifies that our pole is sitting with our people again where it belongs. And so when I reflect on what I've learned from this journey so far, I can say it's not about creating a new story. It's about recognizing power. It's about recognizing the power of the stories that we are part of and the next story that we want to become. Everything that happens to us for a reason. And that's important. We can use new words and change our language, but we also continue to need to take action if we're going to support rematriation. And so I'm going to leave you with some questions so we can continue collectively breathing life into our rematriation efforts. So how can we continue to demonstrate courage and question why we're doing things the way that we're doing them? Are they protocol? How have they been influenced by Christianity, patriarchy, and capitalism? Is this what our ancestors would have wanted? Why can't we do that? Who isn't in the room to help us reach this decision? How can we work together to overcome lateral violence? How can we support each other? And how can we be in balance with each other's roles and responsibilities? And how can we model this for our children? And how can we show reverence and be inspired by the actions of our ancestors to shape our leadership into the future? And so when we step out and we challenge ourselves, we become somebody's hope. And I always ask my students, how are we activating our learning? And we know that activation energy never goes away, and it's always inside of us. And sometimes we just need a little bit of help to wake that up, and sometimes we have our ancestors there helping us to wake it up. So I'm going to ask you, where are your dreams, and are you 1 or 2 steps away from those dreams? And I'm just going to end with one other brief comment about protocol. So life can change very suddenly, and sometimes it does. And when it happens to you, you're in shock. And so I mentioned that I get my love of adventures and my love of fast engines from my dad. I have my class 4, 5, and 6, and I think I probably learned how to ride a motorcycle before I can even walk. But last Thursday, we received news that my dad would take his last adventure. So I wasn't thinking too clearly when I had to pack and go home and help my sister. And so for that reason, I'm wearing all white clothes. And I did call Samag at Nistal and talk to him about it and say, I don't mean any disrespect to our family or to our grieving process right now, but this is what I have. And I know he would want me to be here to finish my commitment and to continue supporting our work. And so that's why I'm wearing all white today. And I can also say that if anybody knows my father, he's also was a very non-conforming person, and particularly when it came to his clothing style. And he also had a good sense of humor. So I think that he's sitting up there laughing at me, standing here all in white when I should be in black. But he also, I've been thinking about it, and I've also decided I'm going to break one of my vows. I sold my motorcycle when my daughter was born, and I thought I never wanted to see my daughter on the back of somebody else's bike. And I suddenly had all these anxieties and fears I never had before. And so, yeah, on Monday, I'm going to ride a Harley Davidson to a celebration of life, and I'm going to be wearing black leather pants just for him. And thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Charles Hayes Secondary School is a grade 9 through 12 high school located in the city of Prince Rupert on the unceded territory of the Tsimshian and Somaliac language-speaking peoples, who have been stewards of the land since time immemorial. The school has a diverse multicultural population, including 55% students of Indigenous ancestry. Let us return our conversation as Dr. Parent takes some questions from the audience.
Amy, I don't know if you remember me, Mrs. Spindley from PRSS and Charles Hayes. Anyway, I was one of your support workers at school. And I remember meeting you and your mom. Oh, you're incredible. You were very spunky then, and you're spunky now, and I love it. Because I'm a spunky girl, too. Congratulations on everything. I'm at the other end of the spectrum now, where I am a mentor, and I really relate to what you're saying about the importance of that. But I took some notes here about how important that is. And I started a Tsimshian Arts and Culture Society in Prince Rupert in 2020, and I worked really hard to build a strengthened organization. And now we're starting to connect with other Tsimshian organizations, and now we're building our capacity, and now we're moving towards things. And it's so exciting, like you say, to be on that journey. Like, it's working, it's actually working. And to see all the support that's there that I am accepting and opening my eyes about, wow, I'm not alone. My whole community is here and they want this, and I'm helping them get it. So I really relate to the work that you did in your community and how valuable that is to our future. So
Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate it. It's amazing to hear what you're doing. I should mention I have a sister, and sometimes people confuse us. I did all my school in Hazelton, and I didn't go to PRSS, but that might have been my sister. And we do look quite a bit alike. I'm 10 years older. But one of the things I love to do when I come up north and my sister's around, I like to put on a hat, and I used to drive around my dad's truck waving at everybody. I gotta wake up. Yeah. She's spunky too. So yeah, thank you, and appreciate all your support for our family and everything that you're doing here. It's really great. Well, great to hear that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm from the Haisla Nation, and I'm so sorry for your loss. What I didn't hear was, how was the totem pole taken in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. So, according to our oral memory and the evidence that we found in the archives, was that Marius Barbeau, colonial ethnographer, had already been coming into the Nass and going up the Skeena as well and other communities. And so about a year prior to him arriving to actually take the pole, he cataloged all these totem poles in all our villages, some up in Gitxsan territory as well. And then he went when we were out and we moved to a different village, and he came in and cut them down and had help. And at that point, it wasn't just our totem pole that was taken, there were several. And the way the story goes was that a huge storm came up the Nass, and so not all the totem poles made it out. One totem pole did end up in France, and it's still there. And then ours, it sat for a while. It took him a while to get it transported across the country, and he was trying to get a better deal on it. The same deal he got for the one that he sent to France. He got a good deal on the railway, and he didn't want to put it on a boat. It sat here in Prince Rupert for a while. But he didn't want to put it on a boat because even back then he knew that transporting it and having to put it on more than one ship might damage it. And so he felt like that was the most direct route. That's what we could find in his field notes. One of the good things about him was he was a very well-documented thief, and he took really good notes. We still don't really particularly know why the National Museums of Scotland chose our pole, other than that just seemed to be the era when museums were, taking all of our things and thinking that we're going to not be around, right? One of the things that we learned once we got to Scotland, and after one of our first days of negotiation, they brought us into a room, and that's when we saw the catalog that he made. So we didn't know that initially, and that was hard to see because he literally took all these totem poles and he put price tags on them. And they apologized to us before they showed it to us, and they were sensitive about it. But yeah, you could see the price tag on our pole. And so I don't know if the price was right or if that was all that was left. The other thing that we know when we tracked down, a lot of his work was coming out of, it changed its names now, but it was the National Museum of Man at the time. Now it's Canadian Museum of History in Gatineau. And so he was primarily located there through most of his career. And so when we started going into the archives and talking to them about his work, they did a tracking on this particular pole, because they said that if it had been done and if he had sold it through what he should have done at that time, although should never have taken it, but he would have brought it through that museum on its way to Scotland, and it would have been cataloged. And when they couldn't find anything in the catalogs, and they said that they also knew that he was known to have these private deals. And so he just did this for profit. Yeah. The other interesting thing about him, and if I have time and if anybody knows of any relationships to support this, is I'd like to go to Quebec.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In 1929, Canadian anthropologist Marcus Barbeau took a pole from the Nisga'a village and shipped it to the National Museum of Scotland. Museum records indicate Barbeau was commissioned by the institution to purchase the pole for $600. Though these colonial documents show a sale by matriarch from the House of Nisga'a, that signature is believed to have been falsified. In this final segment of Open Connection, Dr. Parent shares the reaction she received when Barbeau's story was reframed.
One of the letters I got, you always know you're doing a good job when you have older, white, Caucasian males with a lot of privilege getting mad at you. Just you do. So I got an angry letter from a Quebec lawyer, and he was really upset about the reframing of the story of Marius Barbeau as a thief and our claims that it was stolen. And he initially sent me a 5-page letter in French. A lot of people think I speak fluent French, which I don't. So I thought I'd buy some time and asked him to translate it, but he was retired, so it took him about a day. And came back to me and told me he was going to be taking the ombudsman office in Quebec to make a claim against CBC for their coverage of Marius Barbeau and the defamation of his character. So at some point where we are making a film and a documentary on our work. If we have the time, I don't know if we're gonna have the time, but it might be interesting to go to some of these museums, because they have 2 museums there that revere him still, absolutely revere him. And they just, he's sort of an icon in Quebec, and he did other work with Quebecois culture. But they're still telling these really problematic narratives of him as this sort of great white, anthropologist that saved us. And they're not recognizing our tensions with him, or even what we did to get the pole home, right? So it might be interesting to go have that conversation. I think we need a lot of allies in order to do that over there. Perhaps some well-known Quebecois public figure or something that could support us in that. But I think it would be good to get those museums to also change their stories about him.
During my studies, I ran out of money to go to school. To get my funding, I had to get the Department of Indian Affairs, the Friendship House lawyer, Wolf, gotta love him, and my band and I on a 4-way conference call. Long story short, they gave me 5 years of funding.
Yay.
I did 2 years of college, went into my 4 years of university. By the 3rd year, they cut me off of funding and told me that I now have to be on a waiting list. And the stuff that you talk about having the difficulties going into university setting, if I had somebody like you backing me, I'd probably have my master's degree as well. What kind of advice would you have for a 46-year-old to finish off university is my question.
Yeah, just do it. Just do it. You can do it. Yeah, thank you. You can totally do it. Another one of my mentors and friends, and she's been such an inspiration for me. She started her PhD at the age of 70. She worked at SFU, and she's one of our best trainers of teachers, like in Indigenous education. But she went back at 70, and she's now 75, and she's working on her PhD. We do check-ins, and she still comes and she still helps me train teachers. And yeah, she's such an inspiration. And if we're here in the north, then I don't know if anybody knows Barb Wilson from the Haida Nation, matriarch. And so Barb, I was on the stage with her the day that she graduated with her master's. And she that day was the oldest student at SFU to walk across that stage. And you should have seen that smile on her face. And I was so happy to be able to stand there and give her a hug as she got her degree. So if you want to talk with me, or your daughter wants to talk with me, or anybody else, I'm always happy to have those conversations. That's the best part of my job. And the best part of my job is to be able to stand on that stage. And I always break the rules. I'm supposed to be sitting as a faculty member watching students walk across the stage. But if they're Indigenous students, I go stand and I wait after the president and I give hugs.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.